Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. This week is all about improving your facility and how we can use different left and right hand techniques to more easily play double time lines in your solos. First, we'll go over a couple of exercises to focus on the main techniques that we'll be using, like economy picking, sweeping, and left hand slurs. Then I'll share with you guys a couple of phrases that'll all work over a 2-5-1 in the key of F, and that also provide a great workout to help you utilize these techniques in a musical context. Just like always, I'll play each one of them for you up to tempo, and then we'll do a breakdown on the theory and technique behind each line, so you can get a solid grasp on what you should be practicing. You guys ready? Let's get started. To get the most out of the double time phrases we'll be covering today, you should really make sure you got a firm grasp on some of the fundamental techniques that we'll need in order to execute them effectively. I think it goes without saying that the basis for all this stuff that we'll be covering is a strong foundation in your alternate picking. Now, just so we're all on the same page, let's play an enclosure exercise in the key of F using strict alternate picking. I really can't stress enough that you should play all of these things extremely slowly so you can make sure that you're committing the right movements to muscle memory. Don't even concern yourself with bumping up the metronome gradually at the beginning. Just focus on playing the exercises and later the phrases completely from memory so you can focus entirely on the techniques involved. Before we go on to the next exercise, I want to point out a couple of things about my right hand picking technique. The first thing I think that's worth pointing out is the angle of my pick. I'm not necessarily a Benson picker, but my technique is heavily inspired by his right hand, as well as some notable adherents to him like Rodney Jones and Dan Wilson. Where I think my technique differs from theirs, though, is that I'm not a strict rest stroke player. I do use it when I'm in economy picking, though. I also don't really care too much about locking up my index finger down here the way that you'll see Benson do it. To me, this angle comes more out of the fact that I have a pretty extreme hitchhiker's thumb, and that the standard picking grip feels kind of tense to hold to me. I do, however, want to slice through the string at an angle, though, so that's kind of why I tend to end up in this reversed-looking posture to the standard grip. It also allows me to rapidly twitch my wrist when I'm alternate picking and still get an even-sounding stroke. I also tend to keep this tipped down angle as well, unless I'm picking my way back up the strings. And in that case, I'll tend to flatten out a little bit as I go this direction, so I can more easily jump over the strings when I need to. In this next exercise, you'll see that I almost never use strict alternate picking. Mainly, it's because I just don't like the way it sounds, but it's also because at higher tempos, it's actually much easier, at least during scale runs, to use a combination of economy picking ascending and slurs when descending. Here's how I play a 3-octave scale in F major using these combined techniques. In addition to making this kind of thing much easier to rip through at higher tempos, I think it also just sounds more natural and melodic than if I were to just simply pluck everything all the way through. The last technique we'll go over is sweeping. Most of you are probably familiar with the idea behind sweep picking, but it's incredibly useful in a bebop context and definitely worth spending your time building up if you haven't before. In my case, I use it most often to articulate up or down arpeggios inside of 1 octave. Here's an example of an exercise you can use to work through all the chords in F major using a combination of sweeps and slurs. Now let's continue on with what you guys really came here to learn, how to play blazing fast double time lines over chord changes. Before we do that though, I need to give a quick shout out to Truefire.com for supporting the channel. Truefire is an online lesson library that's host to literally thousands of courses on a wide range of musical topics from some really amazing artists and educators. With synced notation and tablature, as well as slowdown and looping features, it's super easy to follow along no matter what course you decide to pick up. While you wait for my courses to drop, you can use my link in the description or use offer code STUDIO for 35% off at checkout, and you'll also be supporting the channel at the same time. It's never been a better time to learn, practice, and play with Truefire. Also, I've got an exciting announcement regarding my upcoming courses from Truefire. I'm now able to let you guys know that the first course, Exploring Melodic Comping, should be due out sometime in late August or early September, and the second course, Exploring Bebop Blues, will be available in mid to late September. Once I've got more information and hard release dates, I'll of course update you guys on that. I'm super proud of how these courses have come together, and I think you're going to find tons of value in both of them, so definitely look forward to those. Now, let's get back to the lesson and tackle our first double time phrase of the day. Both of these phrases are going to use all the techniques I showed you earlier in different ways to achieve the sound that I want. And make sure you pay close attention to the picking directions and slur indications and practice them super slow and memorize the line before trying to move it up to tempo. Here's the first phrase at speed for you to check out now. Let's slow things way down and get a closer look at both the theory and the technique behind this line. This phrase starts off the flat third of G minor, but I'm really thinking about it in terms of the dominant, C7. So off the flat 7th of C7, I came down the scale with 3 half steps to the 5th, and then came up the chord. The combination of slurred and plucked notes is really important to the sound I'm going for here. The basic idea is to slur the last note on every string while maintaining alternation in the right hand. Now that works out like this. Down, slur, up, down, slur, up, down, slur, up, down, slur, down. That sets me up perfectly to execute a sweep up the chord on the 5th of a C7 and resolve it down. Off the back of that sweep, I went up a C7 arpeggio to the root, and then jumped up to the sharp 9, which is E flat. Then I played this block of language I really like from the E flat 7 scale. We're thinking about dominant family here to get some tension. 1, flat 7, 4, 5. If you look at those notes from the perspective of the C7, we get the sharp 9, the flat 9, the flat 13, and the flat 7. So lots of tension there. Now that block lifts me up to the root of the C7, where I came down the scale with 1 half step to the 5th, and I use that to play this enclosure to the 7th of F and end the phrase. Let's take another listen to how that sounds under tempo this time. Listen for the points of tension and how the slurs really make the line sound more like what you'd expect from a horn player. If you're interested in checking out 8 more phrases like this, make sure you head on over to my Patreon page and grab the PDF for today's lesson. For right now though, let's wrap things up by going over one more phrase using all these techniques over some slightly different language. This phrase, while using similar language, has a fair bit more alternate picking in it than the previous one did. Have a listen to it up to tempo, and then we'll break it down together. Like I told you, a lot more alternate picking going on here. With some strategic slurs and sweeping, though, we can still keep things from sounding too plucky. Let's take a closer look at how this line came together. I started things off with a chromatic enclosure around the third of G minor, sliding up to catch the third. From there, I came down the arpeggio for G minor 7, and then resolved it up into the third of a C7. And then I could run down the scale with 3 half steps to the 5th on the downbeat of the next bar. As far as the technique goes, I decided to pull up into the third of G minor with a slide as a slur instead of a hammer-on because it just felt better to do in that case. It let me play down the arpeggio with my typical technique of slurring the last note on a string. From there, it's all alternate picking up until I got to D flat. From there, I used a slur to get to C, since it's the last note on the string, and then I did something a little funny, and I slurred into this B flat using a slide in the middle of the stream so I could get things to line up and play the sweep that's coming next, starting with the down pick. In the second half of the phrase, I started off with the 5th of a C7, but I'm really thinking about dominant family here and using E flat 7, so playing up the chord off of the 3rd of E flat and then resolving it up. That lands me back up to the 5th of a C7, so I played this enclosure to the 3rd and then pivoted down to the 5th and played up the arpeggio of C7. Then I used a favorite block of language from the E flat 7 scale over C7, which gives me this really juicy altered sound and resolves super cleanly into the 3rd of F to end the phrase. To wrap things up for today, let's take one more listen to that phrase under tempo. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of today's video. I hope you guys find these exercises and phrases useful when trying to work up more double-time language. Remember, it might take a while for this stuff to naturally show up in your playing, but keep at it if you really want to be able to burn over changes like a horn player can. As always, if you found today's lesson helpful, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications too. If you want to get access to a PDF for today's material, which includes 8 more double-time phrases, along with the whole back catalog for all the videos on my channel, you can get that for as little as $10 a month over at my Patreon page, or by just hitting that join button right here on YouTube. A special thanks goes out to Milan de Kaiser and Ron Maestas for being studio fans. I really appreciate the support. An extra special thanks is due to these studio members for their support as well. PH, David Zuckerbraun, Max Irwin, Everton Armstrong, Stephen Schwartz, Aaron Walters, Stephen Prager, Louis Rosen, Zé Soares, Michael LeBroy, Carl Jackson, David Wortman, Aldo Fonseca, Jesse Cable, Tyler Kosarek, and Ron Askew. An extra special shout out to Jazz Luminaire patrons Bill Jacob and Vibhav Bhakti. Thank you guys all so much for your continued support. I'm David Shore, and thanks again for hanging out with me at the studio today. I'll see you guys next time.